Hey y'all, from Spindle Mountain Mercantile, I am Heather. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Project number 1. My friends and family know that I sell a lot of pictures in my booth, so when they are discarding theirs, they give me their pictures in their frames. So I want to thank my friend Sherry for giving me this one. I'm just showing you what I keep off of the back and why I disassemble it with a little bit of order so I can reuse them. These D-rings with the wires are the best way to hang something heavy, so I always save those. Sometimes I have to replace the wire, but this is pretty new, so it's in very good shape. I'm keeping that piece of paper too. I'm also keeping the foam backer board. Man, whoever put this in there did not want me to get it out. They used so many staples, and I edited out a lot of film from this. It probably took me 45 minutes to figure it out and to get them all out. I finally realized if I just put my screwdriver like that and then whacked it with the hammer, it would push all those staples to the center. We use one of these picture frame staplers that we found on Amazon. If you have a booth and you sell pictures, this is a must-have. It's not that expensive, and you can get your money back in the first big picture you sell. In the description, I'll leave a link to it, and anything you buy from Amazon by using my link to get there, they'll give me a small reward, but it won't raise your prices at all. Even though that little thing with the stars is made out of plastic, it looks really good, so I'm going to save it for a different project. I'm taking out the boards that they use to keep that in there, or I don't know, maybe the frame was too big, so they had these little tiny pieces of wood around it, and I took those out, but I did not save those. I was hoping to save this picture for another project, but they glued it right onto that backer board, and when I tried to remove it, it ripped, and the whole thing would have ripped if I kept trying, so I gave up. Now, don't be afraid of pink. You can use something else, but this is going to highlight the picture I have for this. It's Debbie's DIY in the color Petticoat Pink, and I'm only using it on the raised surfaces. I'm going to wet distress this, so I want the pink to show through. I want some of the, it's not wood, it's like plastic or whatever, but some of the frame color, the dark color, to show through too. But I want a lot of pink to show through, so I'm putting it all around the decorative, what do they call that? Dental? Is that dental? It's not dots. It's like little rectangles. I think they call it dental work. Man, that made me like stick my tongue up on my teeth and try to clean my teeth. I haven't even eaten yet today. I guess I didn't clean them good enough yesterday. That's probably TMI. Anyway, so I have to seal this if I want the pink to show. So I'm using matte clear Rust-Oleum spray. And then over the top of that, I'm adding White Swan. I'm giving it 2 good coats. It's really heavily pigmented, so sometimes it doesn't even take 2. And then I'm not sealing it until after I wet distress it. You have to seal this paint because it reconstitutes with water. That's how we wet distress. And if you don't, then later on when it gets splattered, it's gonna have a big old mark on it. And you don't want that. Nobody wants that. To wet distress, you can use a wet wipe or a paper towel that you get wet and wring it out. I like to use a regular kitchen towel or a washcloth, and then I can just throw it in the washer and reuse it again. When I sealed the pink, I didn't go over it evenly with the spray. I did it kind of in blotchy areas so that when I wet distress, I don't have to use different kinds of pressure to get all the way down to what looks like wood. I just use the same pressure over the whole thing, and whatever I sealed, that's going to show. So I'm getting a really good mix of pink versus dark. Usually at this point, I would show you the finished product completely, but first I want to show you another frame. I did the same way, except for one thing. I sealed it with a different sealer. But first we're taking a break so I can show you this. I brought the frame inside to work on it, and I had the eggs. I did it right next to where we keep the eggs. So here is a regular egg, okay? That's what they that's what they charge you for in the store, is that great big egg. And you think you're getting the middle one, but no, you get that one. I feel so sorry for the chicken. We think the same chicken laid both of these. My husband said that God loves chickens too, because the day after she laid the big one, he let her just get away with laying that little one. Okay, back to the frames. For the first one, I used this Rust-Oleum 2x spray in clear matte. If you follow the manufacturer's directions on mineral-based paints, then you should not use this kind of sealer. You should always use an oil-based sealer on oil-based paint and a water-based sealer on water-based paint. If you don't, you can get some discoloration. Sometimes it will bubble. You might get some splotches. Now, I like that on a lot of things I do, so I do it often. I even did a whole video about some old paint that I have from leaving it outside, and I call it my Hillbilly Chippy paint method. On this one, the second frame, I used Debbie's DIY Big Top After Show. It's a sealer that is made for this kind of paint, and it dries very clear, and I did 2 coats. It's really thick too. It's hard to scratch stuff through this. I really recommend it if you want to maintain the integrity of the surface you created and not change it at all with your sealer. Now, this is the one I used Rust-Oleum on, and you can see right at the beginning where it goes into the shallow areas, it's almost like it's stripped some of that paint. I don't know how it works. It's a chemical sciencey thing, and that's not my gig. All I know is it looks like I left it outside. Now, you never get the same result, so if you have in your mind exactly how you want it, don't do this because it's going to be different every time. This is what I like, though. I like it to look like some of the paint peeled off with a chemical. I like it to look chippy. I like it to look like it's been sitting outside for a year. This is the one I did with Debbie's DIY Big Top, and now that I'm looking at it on the screen, I don't know if you guys are even going to be able to tell the difference between the two. You could go back and forth and look, but this one, the white is not discolored like the other one. And also, this one only has the darker color and the pink underneath as well, showing where I intentionally rubbed it off when I wet distressed it. The other one, it kind of rubbed off because it did a chemical thing, like I said. But there's the difference. We use this Ramboard seam tape on the back of our pictures so that they have a finished look, like we bought them at a framing shop. It just gives it a really nice finished look. Now, we buy ours on Amazon, and I'll leave a link for it, but they sell it for less at Lowe's, and I don't know about the price at Home Depot, but I do know they sell it there. Are you dying to know what picture I put in this frame? Oh, isn't she cute? I just love her. I don't know what I'm going to name her yet. Maybe Pretty in Pink. Unfortunately, I broke the glass on this one I sealed with Debbie's DIY Big Top, but you can still get the idea of how the frame turned out. And I might actually do this technique where you make it look like an oil painting. I think you use Mod Podge and you like make little swirly strokes with your paintbrush. What do you guys think? Should I do that? I've seen people do it before and they look really good. I'm just sometimes afraid to try something new. Project number 2. I am not gonna lie, this was a doozy. I found this picture at a thrift store and I believe I paid half price, so it was like $1.50. I don't want to save any of the paper from the back, but I do want to save the backboard and all of the matting. I'll be removing those things pretty gingerly so they won't tear. Apothecary is my favorite Debbie's DIY paint color, but I want to lighten it up, so I'm going to mix just a small amount of it in with a bigger amount of White Swan. And to mix it, I'm using a handheld submersible blender I bought on Amazon, and I will leave a link for that in the description. We like this so much. We have one in the house and one in the she shack. We mix all of our soups and everything with it. It's really strong. I'm just using this little frother attachment because I'm only mixing a small amount of paint. But for the bigger cans, I can use the larger attachments. When I'm in the house or traveling, I use this little frother. It's rechargeable. I also got it on Amazon. It's great, but it only does the smaller 2 sizes of cans. It's really not strong enough to handle like a gallon or a half gallon. For a lot of projects, you only need 1 coat of Debbie's paint because it's so heavily pigmented, but I'm applying 2 of this lighter color to the darker bronze and gold. Don't forget, this is water-soluble paint, so it has to be sealed, but I won't be doing that until after I wet distress it. You can tell I let it dry really good because I've obviously done a lot more projects on this Lazy Susan since I started this one. Look at all that paint. Oh, I make such a mess. You guys, some of you have told me in the comments that you love my mess, so thank you for that. I must be really, really, really loved. I used the spray bottle to actually put the water on the frame because it had dried pretty good and it was a little bit harder to get this paint off with just a damp cloth. I really went to town on this. A lot of times when I distress, I only want a little bit to show through, but I really like how this gold was looking. After I got to the level of distressing I wanted, I took a clean wet wipe and I just did one swipe over everything, and that just gets any leftover paint residue that might still be on the gold. Because I want to keep the integrity of this blue intact and don't want it to be discolored with the sealer, I'm using Debbie's Big Top After Show. It makes it, all it does is seal it. It doesn't add any color. It adds a little bit of sheen, but just a little, like satin, not semi-gloss. I'm not gonna lie, I did a really icky job on this part. It was such a mess, but it doesn't really matter as long as you keep the integrity of the stiffness of all of these mats. It's really hard to get them separated. Sometimes people just use a little bit, but yeah, they used a lot of bit of glue in this. For the first mat that goes right around the picture I'm doing, I'm using Debbie's DIY liquid patina in the color Golden Ticket. I'm going to put 2 coats on it, but then after I was done and I was putting it with the picture, I thought it needed just a little bit more in a few places, so I added that. And I only painted up to that white line that is left when they cut the mat at an angle. I thought that gave it a nice little extra outline. For the mat that goes right on top of this, I used the same apothecary that I used on the frame, but I don't have footage of that. I got out my white swan again and I did the top mat. I put one layer on, let it dry, and then I added another layer right before I put the paint inlay on it. Now when you do a paint inlay, it's a lot like a transfer, except instead of using ink, they used paint. So that paint is dry on a piece of paper, and when you put that piece of paper down on wet paint, it makes the paint soak into the other paint. Yeah, you guys understand me. I know you get me. We can only hope. So when I get done with this, you will think, wow, Heather, that's awesome, right? Yeah, you can't see it up close. It was so bad, and I was so sad because this was all I had left of the new paint inlay from the 2025 spring release. I almost shed a little tear. It just, it didn't work. I don't know what I did. Well, part of the problem was that bottom piece is one I used a second time because you can keep using this. It just gets lighter each time, so you can use it like 3 times. Sadly, it was much lighter on the bottom, so I started over. I painted over it. The saddest part is I didn't have any more of this paint inlay at home. This is from the spring 2025 release. So I grabbed a paint inlay that I had in my stash that's called Lattice Rose, and this is actually my favorite paint inlay. I have maybe I've used 4 of these so far, and people seem to really like what I do with it, so it's been really good for business. When you lay it down, you make sure you lay it down on wet paint. You don't want a really thick coat, just kind of somewhere in between. You have to just kind of figure that out. And then you go over it with a brayer to get all the water out. And you guys, I'm going to be honest again, this is my 3rd time. I did another one of these where I cut the pieces first and it just didn't work. I couldn't get them to line up right. So I decided just to use a whole sheet and then cut it out. And this worked great. It got all those little pieces of lattice together where they're supposed to be. I finally liked it. But wow, that was a thing. So when you're ready to remove it, you spray it, get the whole paper wet again, and you wait about 30 seconds to a minute so that that paint underneath the white, like on here, the white part, isn't still stuck to the paper. And you just gently start pulling it back, and it feels so good to do this. It's like therapy. I sell Debbie's DIY in my booth, but I don't do mail order. If you want to order directly from Debbie, though, she's given me a link, and I'm putting it in my description. And if you use that, she'll give me a little thank you, but you won't have to pay any extra. For the picture in the center, I'm using White Swan, and I again give it one really good coat, let it dry, and then I add another in between thick and thin coat to put the paint inlay on. And I did such a good job placing these roses. I had them exactly where I wanted them, and it looked really good from a distance. Like from the house looking out to the sheet shack. Oh, by the way, did you see me spraying the paint right there? That's how you get it to have no brush marks, but didn't really matter. Once I pulled this all up, again, it looks close. I mean, up close it looks good, but I'm not even a perfectionist, so I don't understand all this. I don't understand what was happening, but I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be really honest with you guys. Even though I'm not a perfectionist, I don't want it to look like ick. So I have this quandary in my head when I do stuff like this. So I did a whole nother design, and this one I laid the strips of little roses around the edges, and you guys, it just, it was too much. So I did this one a third time as well. Ugh. I even put the bird transfer on, and I don't know. Now I'm looking at it and I think, well, was it really that bad? It really, really was that bad. Especially when I look at what I ended up with. So, yep, painted over it, let it dry. Now I'm adding a second coat so I can use a different paint inlay. And this one is also from the Lattice Rose. I just cut one little section out. Sometimes I get them wet and sometimes I don't. I think that the company IOD, Iron Orchid Designs, recommends you get them wet. I guess it depends on what surface I'm using. In my mind, I just kind of go with it, you know what I mean? Back to the mats. I laid the gold edged one down, and then I put the one on top of it that I didn't show you how I did it. It's the one with the Apothecary White Swan mix on just the edge. And when I had separated the mats, I tore that. And I was hoping the paint would just kind of seal it, but it didn't. So I cut some roses out of another leftover transfer piece, and I put them over the two cracks on one side, and then I added that one right there at the other side just to make it look like it was intentional and that it wasn't covering something up. I'll tell you what, if you can't beat them, join them. And I make so many mistakes, I just have to join them. And literally, I joined that tear with some roses. So the birds I put on there that I covered up, I don't have any left. I didn't have any other birds, and birds sell. They sell very quickly in my booth. So I took the Yuletide transfer set from the Christmas 2024 release, and I cut off the holly berries and the leaves so that these birds are only sitting on the limb. And I decided to do it at an angle so it's on point like a diamond. I see that? See me putting my hand down on there? That means I was checking to make sure it was absolutely dry, because you wouldn't believe how many transfers, well, if you know me, you would believe how many transfers I have ruined by not having a dry surface on which to apply them. I'm just making sure everything fits. Oh, it's so pretty, can't stand it. And I'm going to go over again how to do a transfer. When you get it exactly where you want it, you just kind of rub over it with your fingers, and then you take the little transfer stick that comes in every package and you rub the entire transfer. Then start at one end or one corner, and you gently pull the plastic sheet, which is called a carrier sheet. You lift it up, and as you lift it with one hand, you use your other hand with the transfer stick, and you rub at the little crease where it comes up from your project, and you just rub and pull and rub and pull. And if there's pieces of the transfer that don't adhere to your project, then just lay the transfer sheet back down, the carrier sheet back down, and rub it again, and usually that'll work. Sometimes you might have to really work with it, especially if your paint's wet. If you don't ruin the transfer completely, sometimes you can get it to adhere to paint that's not all the way dry, but just avoid that. Just don't do that. It's so sad when you waste a transfer, especially if it's birds. Man, that's for the birds. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I almost didn't say it, but I'm nothing if I'm not real. When you're done getting all of the transfer onto your object, you take the same sheet and you rub the entire transfer with it, and that's called burnishing, and it just gets every little bit and piece and all of the edges adhered really well so they don't flake off. I love this Sprayway glass cleaner. It is so efficient and I don't have to use as much as I do with the other kind that's real liquidy. And you can buy it at different places, but I get mine at Amazon and it's a really good price, so I'll leave a link to that as well. I found some paper towels, I can't remember where, just the grocery store, that actually break down into quarters of a sheet. So I use that at the very end. I use a whole new one that's dry to get the streaks out. And there's other ways, but I like that one. And look how pretty this is. Ah, and wait till you see it in the frame, you guys. It's just beautiful. I am so glad I screwed up so much. Oh, I want to keep this one again. Oh, man. But I can't. I have to make some money to pay for all these expenses, so where I made the mistakes, so I can feed my family. So did you guys have a favorite? And I'm not talking about just which picture you like the best. Which technique was your favorite? And also, I want to know, have you ever messed up so many times you just wanted to quit? Because that's how I felt with this today. And when I got done, I was so glad I didn't quit. And you know what it made me think of? It made me think of my life. I'm like, okay, most of the time I look back and I think, okay, God was right. He's going to work all these icky things together to make them good. And I'm so thankful for that. And I am so thankful I didn't quit with this project. That is such a blessing, and I hope that these projects continue to be blessings to somebody else, to whoever buys them and puts them in their own house or gifts them to somebody else. I hope it does that for them. If you guys liked this video, would you please give me a thumbs up, and would you consider subscribing to my channel? You don't want to miss any of this, do you? I don't know, maybe you do. If you do, okay, I bid thee farewell. Thanks for trying. And to the rest of you, thanks for staying. Until you see me again next time, I hope you have a wonderful week. And as always, I hope you are blessed. Bye.